Hi, I'm going to give this another go. I think I've had about three false starts here, but it's early in the morning. I'm not usually up early in the morning, but I figured I'd go ahead and uh, do something constructive or creative. This might be the best it gets while I'm in kind of a dazed state. So I'm going to proceed with another episode of Blue Review and talk about films that I've been streaming uh, lately and ones I've discovered for the first time, new and old. So uh, I'm going to go ahead and start off with this one called Pyewacket. This was directed in 2017, or released in 2017 by this cat named Adam MacDonald, who I really know nothing about. Um, and it stars a young lady named Nicole Munoz, a young Hispanic actress. She plays a character named Leah. And basically, the film revolves around her and her relationship with her mother, who's a decidedly unpleasant individual. Let's just put it that way. Um, Doing a little additional research here, her mother is played by a lady named Laurie Holden, who I had recognized, but I can't recall from what. I'm not really good with the trivia this morning. I'm sorry. I'll try to get with it as I go. But about Pyewacket, it was one I was curious about for a while. A friend who's pretty much makes it a point to chase down every new horror film he can. Unlike myself, though, I do chase down quite a few of them. But a lot of them suck, as you heard from some of my reviews on here. Um, but anyway, this guy was touting this like a year or two ago, and uh, so anyway, I finally happened upon it on Hulu. So here's the deal. So Leah is this teenage girl, maybe 15 to 17, hard to say. She has kind of a goth metalhead kind of look, punk rock kind of look, all black, and very cool chick, affable, and she's very into the occult. And her father has passed away, and she's left with her mother, who's really a decidedly unpleasant individual. Did I say that already? Well, anyway, I may say it again ere this thing is finished. Um, Basically, someone who's just, I guess she's the mother. I guess she's grieving the husband. Her motives are kind of unclear for a while. At first, it seems like she might be a drug addict or an alcoholic, and then she's just generally verbally abusive and cruel and doesn't care what her daughter does, doesn't give a fuck. So her daughter hangs out with some kids around her age, and then they're kind of these semi cliche kind of teenagers. There's like a nerdish kind of guy. He likes her, Leah, and she likes him. It's kind of this coy back and forth. Leah has a best friend who's kind of a goth chick, sort of. And always wearing the band T-shirts and has like braided hair. And then there's this kid who's like the emo punk guy of the group with the asymmetrical black hair and the full gear, closer to Leah's look, and he's kind of the cynic of the crowd, and I guess also kind of the jokester. Anyway, none of these characters really emerge as really full blown, except for Leah. The emo guy is in it the least, but he also provides some conflict because what happens is uh, Leah's escape is into the occult, and she's got all these books and uh, all these various items she's collected for rituals. At this point, she's just pretty much reading and escaping, and she tells her mom, that this is something she likes. This is an outlet, and it's something that she found, I guess, after her father passed. And her mother, of course, is vehemently against it for no other reason than she's vehemently against it because she doesn't really seem to have any religious rationale for being against it. She's like Groucho Marx, whatever it is, she's against it. So, except she's not that cool or anti-authoritarian. She is the authoritarian, the mother. Bafflingly, well, like I said, I'm not really sure what her mother's trip is. It's a bad take early on. I think then they try to humanize her, but maybe too late because she pretty much tells Leah, that she hates her, the whole kind of, she doesn't really care if she lives or dies. I forget the exact phraseology, but us children of abusive parents have heard numerous variations on it. I wish I'd never had you. I wish you'd never been born, and blah, blah, all that exciting, encouraging vitriol that spews forth when they're in those moods. So she gives it to Leah. I could really identify with Leah, and of course, Leah runs upstairs and dives into her books. But it's a bit frantic, and it's not depicted in a cheesy, trite kind of way, like a kid, having an angst tantrum and cranking their music up and whatever, or even taking drugs in the corner. She's very determined, and she's very knowledgeable, and she goes out into the middle of the woods. She's collected a number of items, and one of them, which is a knife, she has to shed her own blood for this ritual, and she performs this ritual. And it's essentially black magic, in that she basically wishes her mother dead, and she's totally in the moment. She's totally focused, and her energy is totally in that direction. So, which is good for an effective spell. It's bad for her mom, because then, like I said, for some bizarre reason, or maybe the script's convenience, her mom suddenly becomes more humanized and nicer, and I guess it's somewhat believable. She feels sorry, but it seems like a sudden change. This woman seemed more like a long time abuser of herself and her child, and then suddenly she seems more like a woman who is just acting out because of grief over her husband and taking it out on her daughter. Be that as it may, let you decide what take you prefer. I guess you could look at it either way or both. But suffice to say, Leah begins to regret this path of the unknown that she has embarked upon, and she starts getting paranoid about all kinds of little incidences that are happening, and she confides in her friends, and I have to say they're not the most sympathetic, especially the emo guy. He's kind of a dick, and they basically make her feel guilty for what she's done. I mean, it's like on the one hand, they don't believe her that it's really going to happen. Anything supernatural is going to ensue. On the other hand, they scold her for doing it against her mother. So her best friend, her female counterpart, is probably the most sympathetic, and she tries to take her mind off of all this, and she invites the girl to stay with her over a weekend. And the mother now, who's trying to, who's getting a new part-time job, and she's trying to get her head together all of a sudden, and she's like, okay, sure, more the merrier. You can come and stay with us. She's trying to do anything to appease her daughter and make up for her nasty behavior. And essentially, the girl wants to come and stay with her also because she wants to go with Leah to the woods to see the place where the ritual was performed, because she is kind of trying to believe Leah, and she's also kind of, I guess, excited and curious about it because it's something wicked and forbidden anyway. So a variety of motivations, but the girl kind of pulls a prank on Leah in the pitch blackness of the woods, and then apologizes later. And Leah's constantly, on edge. And this young lady stays the night in like a guest room, and when she's there, a being of some kind, an entity, comes to her. It's a pretty scary scene. It was very well done. It wasn't like a jump scare. It was just genuinely kind of creepy. And the next day, she's pretty much lost her mind. Well, first they can't find her for a long time, and then they think they find her sitting in one of their cars, and she's just, catatonic pretty much. So anyway, that takes care of her. So I mean, later she comes out of it, and she's, I don't mean in that same area, but later, like at school or somewhere, they meet up, and she's like, I don't want to ever come to your house again, leave me alone. And So now she's kind of put out, but the nerdish quasi boyfriend he's starting to become a little more sympathetic, either because he feels bad for her state of anxiety, or he's realizing more and more that she's a really hot girl, and he can't really find anyone else. No, I'm kidding. Um, he seems like an all right guy. Um, they don't go into any sexual terrain with these characters, and that's a kind of a refreshing change too. I mean, they don't really depict them. They strongly suggest they do drugs, but they don't really go into any of their sex lives or whatever. And the romance is just kind of under the surface. So in a way, they come off more as kids, maybe 13 and 14, in that kind of level, because most kids that I see who are apparelled in all black and being rebellious, who are like 15, 16, they've already had more life experience as far as sex and substances than probably I'll ever will. So this is kind of this is a little more clean cut bunch of rebels. But anyway, Leah is always believable. The actress is excellent, and slowly, it's a slow burn, but it kept my attention, which is kind of one of the major things in a film that I appreciate these days, especially with newer films that aren't always as atmospheric or as interesting as some of the classics that I enjoy. If they're very cinematic or something, then I'm going to flow with it. I'll be enthralled with those formal aspects of it. Just this a tiny bit, but otherwise, the story has to at least keep my attention. The pacing, what's going to happen next. That's kind of an essential ingredient in storytelling. And if you're doing commercial storytelling like filmmaking, then that's kind of, well, I guess it should be one of your goals if you're the filmmaker, storyteller, what have you. But too many people, especially big Hollywood movies, they just don't catch your attention. They automatically assume you're ADD, and so they've got to explode something up and do something extremely over the top flourishes in order to keep you from nodding off. This one held my attention because, like I said, I think it treats the subject matter intelligently, and it's minimalist in the sense that it gives you the premise, it shows you what's happening, but again, it works on your imagination, so you can decide. I mean, definitely it's supernatural. It's not one of those you decide is it real or not. No, it's definitely real. She definitely summons another presence into our reality, who gradually manipulates her and pushes her into these events happening. In other words, this being isn't just going to pop up, kill off her mom, and leave. That's what she's afraid of. But everything she does to try to prevent this happening, of course, brings it closer to happening. So essentially, the mother dies by her hand. Yes, spoilers. I know I always give you thousands of spoilers, so expect that. And it's pretty crazy because basically the demon or what have you can change forms, and you don't really see its true form very closely. They keep it kind of mysterious, but it's definitely malevolent. It definitely disguises itself as her mother and throws her off track a few times. And I think partially because her mother had such extreme moods to begin with, and the girl is really kind of freaking out, losing her grip a little, while still kind of being as strong as one could possibly be in this situation. She gets confused, and so the being that she thinks is her mother actually is the demon. And I kind of figured that. Just a little too cold to be the current incarnation of the mother. So finally, at wit's end, and her semi-boyfriend kind of on the way to try to help her because she's really losing it. She very kind of cold-bloodedly comes upon her real mother sleeping and saturates her with alcohol or gasoline and sets her ablaze. And it's pretty vicious. It's pretty shocking, and the woman is obviously like, why the hell would my daughter burn me to death? It's just a lot of anguish in her eyes as she's dying. Um, and so she's been manipulated into fulfilling the end result, the end game of this uh, ritual. And so, in a way, the demon doesn't have to swoop in and kill her mom. The demon just obfuscates things and misdirection, and basically preys on Leah's own regrets and uncertainty as to what's really happening. So, on the one hand, you have a girl who's kind of in over her head, but on the other hand, she's very, when it comes to like performing the ritual or killing her mom or trying to find ways to help herself or even to keep the peace with her mom for a period of time and keep this under wraps. She's very calculating, and I don't mean that in a sinister fashion. She's just very uh, always thinking. So this is a pretty intense performance by this young lady, and I think she obviously is very promising. Um, like I said, it kept my attention. It was suspenseful and it was interesting, and I do enjoy, well done occult oriented films, and there were quite a few films in that vein when I was growing up, but I was a little too young to appreciate them, and now I watch films from that era, and I'm fascinated with them. Some of them turn out to really be kind of lame, but the whole trappings of witchcraft and the occult and black magic, what have you, and Satanism. Uh, I find it endlessly fascinating, as you can probably tell from my 2-hour discourse on Hellstrom. So I can't say this is like a masterpiece of the genre or anything, or even that subgenre, but I did like it. I would recommend it. It's like I said, it's well above average for this kind of a modern horror film. It does, yeah, okay. I can go on and on with various plaudits and then make it sound like it's more incredible than it actually is. But I was surprised at how good it was. Let's just put it that way. So the next one I want to talk about is called A Strange Thing About the Johnsons from 2011. This is by our boy Ari Aster, who is kind of like the A24 champion, the god of indie horror, due to Hereditary and Midsummer. I'm being irreverent. I like his work fine. I'm not convinced he's the second coming of the genre or filmmaking, and I'm not an A24 groupie, but I know a lot of them, and he's high on the food chain along with Robert Eggers and a few other filmmakers, the Safdie brothers. But I talked about this in another video a little bit. So anyway, this is way pre Hereditary for Aster. There aren't really any A24 vibes in this one, and it is horror, but it's a horror of a more earthy nature, and more, I guess, believable. Potentially could happen, probably is happening, even as we speak. Too much. It's about familial, incestuous sexual abuse, and it's a short film. It's only 30 minutes long. Um, and it's also an African American family. I mean, middle class to upper middle class African American. And there's a weird dynamic between the father and the son. And the mother seems oblivious to it. And the movie spans a number of years. I mean, there's an opening sequence where the father catches the son masturbating by accident and then gives him this kind of long, detailed, awkward, uncomfortable speech about how he doesn't want the kid to be awkward and uncomfortable about this. But how could you really not be? I mean, even if he approves, it's still kind of awkward and uncomfortable talking to your dad about it. So the dad, you're not sure if he's like a sex positive guy. He's just like an open minded guy. He wants to be a good parent. He wants his son to have a healthy view of sexuality. That's all well and good, but then you think, well, the cloud under the silver lining is that the father is probably molesting his kid. It's kind of like Something Out of Happiness by Todd Solondz. So the big twist is that it's the other way around. as we flash forward a number of years, we realize that the son has been molesting, sexually assaulting, and raping the father repeatedly since he was a teenager. It probably started not long after the little masturbation talk they had. So the son is definitely a malevolent figure. I mean, you're not sure if maybe the dad puts it into motion and he's just projecting. The dad is writing like an autobiography about it, which no one will read but himself, he hopes. And it's kind of like a catharsis and a confession, and basically confessing his shame over the fact that his son has been sexually assaulting him, and that he's kind of allowed it to happen and doesn't know what to do. It's a weird scenario, to put it mildly. The son gets married to a woman for God knows what reason. I guess just to cover his true inclinations. And I don't mean to sound sinister, because he's I guess homosexual, but sinister because his true inclinations are more like, I want to fuck my dad and only my dad. So, but yeah, and so it just gets more and more uncomfortable. The mother kind of sees a little sexual activity in an alleyway during the wedding, whatever comes after the reception, and it's a bit disturbing. So she finally begins adding things up in her head. The son finds the father's confessional novel or what have you. His father's a poet. He's like an award-winning poet. He's like Mr. Sensitive, and the more you watch it, the more you realize that. Well, I think that the point I got was that the father actually is a victim, and that's the whole twist of the film. The whole film pivots around that twist, is that the father genuinely is the victim in this case, and for whatever reason, the son is like the deviant. And we're not sure how it started, but from a young age, the son became sexually fixated on the father, and that's the way he feels love is, and that's an expression of his love. It's to sexually abuse his father. And we've seen it played out the other way, and we always are like, and with good reason, like the parent or older family member is the predator, clearly. And, all their protestations about, I love them, this is showing my love, is just self-serving garbage, and they're really just destroying a life. So now you kind of have this weird twist on it that may seem unlikely. I don't think it's mocking real situations like this in which the older family figure is the perpetrator. I think it's just kind of a what if. And like I said earlier, this could be going on. I don't know. There could be consensual affairs between fathers and sons going on in the house behind the mother's back. That I've actually heard of some things in real life along those lines. Not as much with father and son, but father and daughter, unfortunately. Pretty dark stuff. So it all kind of, on a short film like this, it quickly spirals out of control, and the father basically is just running from the angry, jealous, possessive son, who's almost like a caricature character compared to the parents at this point. I mean, he's sinister, and it's almost comical at times, because every time his father looks up, his son's like, giving him the side eye, and or making some lustful comment or grabbing his ass. He's not Mr. Subtlety. And so it's amazing that the mother would not know for that long. Or is it? I don't know. But anyway, the father is so freaked by the son, he runs into traffic and is killed in front of their home. And of course, the son has this emotional breakdown, and the mother comes out. And she's like, "What happened to your father?" And the son is like, it's like he's the widow. And he's like, "Get away. I loved him. You didn't. You have no idea." And it makes it even more creepy and more bizarre and surreal. And so the mother decides, when the dust settles, the father's buried, the son's kind of chilling at the house, going through the father's things, and of course he's well, he thought he burnt the manuscript or whatever, um, revealing their interaction. The mother confronts the son, and she's kind of finally pieced everything together, and she accuses, the son of doing what the son's been doing up until the father's death, and the son, of course, denies it. He's really an arrogant asshole, basically. And then he finally is just self-righteous about it. I mean, he kind of is mocking of her, and he's a sick person, man. So, he starts beating the shit out of the mom, and the mom's not having it. She takes the poker by the fireplace, reliable self-defense weapon in a horror movie, and she pummels that guy into oblivion. There's not much left of him when she's finished. I mean, it's not very graphic, but you kind of get that impression when you pound on someone's head with the metal into this thing, 5,000 times. Probably not much left of that skull. So that was a cathartic moment. That was my favorite part of the movie. And there you go. I mean, the whole thing is just angst. So I liked it. I thought, to be honest, I liked it better than Midsummer or Hereditary. I'm probably going to get excommunicated from being any kind of film critic of any stripe by saying that, especially of horror films. But I think it didn't completely take itself seriously. Whereas at the same time, I guess that kind of strange, like, is this really happening kind of vibe added to it to make it creepier. And whereas Hereditary and Midsummer are definitely played straight from beginning to end. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like straight, serious drama, something missing from a lot of horror films all through the decades. Something more sober and thoughtful. I'm just not personally convinced that Hereditary and Midsummer are to the lofty level, to those lofty levels as their fan base assigns them. But I think in comparison to a lot of stuff, yeah, I get it. And I guess maybe those films are not for my generation. Maybe they are for the A24 generation. I appreciate them, and I respect what they're doing. I don't necessarily enjoy them from beginning to end. There were parts of Midsummer I enjoyed that were cathartic, mainly Florence Pugh's. She surrenders to this cult, and they destroy her asshole boyfriend and his dude bro college buddies. That was refreshing, and not from a feminist point of view, but I understand from a certain feminist point of view that would be satisfying. Just from a kind of a karmic point of view, it was satisfying, and the ending of the movie with her incredible facial expressions, which she's just an amazing nuanced actress. I talked about her in my Black Widow review. The last shot makes the whole movie for Midsummer. It's just sometimes it's a slog getting there for me. And Hereditary, I had no idea half the time where it was going or trying to go. But the payoff at the end was pretty interesting, and it was a bit over the top, but that was entertaining. I like Hail Paimon or whatever. So yeah, those are movies that eventually I'll rewatch one day and maybe reassess and maybe like more or like less. But I definitely respect them, and I think this film is an indication that this guy has or had another layer to this kind of film before he made a hit with these films. So the last one I want to talk about is Candyman. Speaking of sobering, serious horror, Candyman 1992 was really, like Hellraiser and other Clive Barker related things, much more of a sober affair than a lot of the 80s slasher and comedy horror offerings. Hellraiser was kind of refreshing when it came out in that sense. It was genuinely dark and vile, and Candyman the same. I mean, when I first watched Candyman, I did not like it. because I felt it was a leftover from the 80s with a lot of slasher tropes and the let's frame the main character and make it look like she did the killing, and Candyman, no one sees him but her, and it really annoyed the living hell out of me. Well, as you know, because I've reviewed this for the channel too, it's gone on to become one of my favorite horror films ever. I see it from a totally different point of view now. I mean, I understand why those elements would be annoying. So, who's seen all those cliches play out in other films? But to me, Candyman is a more of a modern gothic horror romance. It has a lot of those tropes of past lives and reincarnation and revenge and karma. And it also, of course, has the main conceit of the urban legend. So that's based on Clive Barker's story, The Forbidden, which the movie is quite a bit different, but the movie does preserve the character Candyman's essence perfectly. Pretty much all of his dialogue, more or less all of his dialogue from The Forbidden is verbatim, preserved. No, verboten's forbidden. Verbatim, there you go. Preserved from the story. And Tony Todd is amazing. The music's amazing, and I've already reviewed this movie. So now in 2021, after the original film had a couple of sequels a while back, which were okay, but not nearly the level of the original. Now there came the rumblings of a reboot or a remake, and actually it's neither. It's a sequel. It's a direct sequel, even though it has the same name. I don't know why they've started doing that. You know, like The Thing was a prequel to The Thing, and Halloween was a sequel to Halloween. I don't know. I guess you have to put the dates on them to distinguish them. That's what I'm going to do on the header of this. So, this Candyman, when I found out it was a sequel, that way made me feel better. I understood that Tony Todd either was not going to be in it or hardly at all. The star is Yahya Abdul-Mateen, and I've praised him before for his work in Watchmen. I did a Watchmen review of the Watchmen TV series on HBO, and I think 5 people have ever watched it. It's probably like the least. It's probably the video that least people are interested in of all the ones I've made ever, and that's cool. I guess no one liked that series among people that might watch my videos, or maybe they just don't want to hear me talk about it. But I did put his image, his icon of him as Dr. Manhattan, his an iconic image of Abdul as Dr. Manhattan as my thumbnail for my Watchmen video. So go back and watch it. You know, it really needs some help there with views. But either whether you do or not, he's one of my favorite up and coming actors. He was in a great Black Mirror episode called Striking Vipers alongside Anthony Mackie, who's known for The Falcon. I've reviewed his series too on here. And it really had a lot of layers as far as like male friendship and male sexuality and homoerotic undercurrents to it, and masculinity and specifically Black masculinity. I thought it was sensitively done, and it's probably my favorite Black Mirror episode, possibly. There is one, Hang the DJ, I think, that is I like more. But anyway, so I like seeing him, and I was happy that he was the lead in this, and he's playing Anthony McCoy, who is the grown-up version of the baby that Helen Lyle saves at the end of the original Candyman from a fire. And of course, at first they think she kidnaps it, but actually Candyman does. Dying, she returns baby Anthony to his mother, played by Vanessa Williams, not the, penthouse / singer / Ugly Betty Vanessa Williams, Vanessa L. Williams. But this is the first woman named Vanessa Williams joined SAG, the Screen Actors Guild. So she's just Vanessa Williams. So that's why the more famous Vanessa had to put the L in her name. So, and she's the only actress that wholesale reprises her role from the original. So Tony Todd does make an appearance as Candyman. Also, there are some audio recordings found of Helen Lyle from the other film, and Virginia Madsen uh, performs those, the voice for those. So they're involved, but essentially it's kind of a new beast, but it's kind of not only taking the urban legends thing, but it's building another theme that's already kind of inherent or implicit within it, which is that of obviously of racism, of unjust murder of black people by white people motivated by bigotry and hatred. That's all part and parcel of the origin of Daniel Robitaille, the original Candyman played by Tony Todd in the original three films. They talk a bit about it as part of the legend in the first film, and they strongly hint that Helen might be a reincarnation of the white woman that the ill-fated Black Daniel fell in love with in New Orleans in the 19th century, and they beat him and they put honey all over him and bees stung him to death. They cut off his uh, hand and left hand, right hand, and put a hook there. And of course, then he begins haunting, the earth after that. If you say Candyman 5 times, he will appear. That's the urban legend. Everyone knows all this. So they do a pretty good job building on this, but it's kind of concurrent with the other theme. And maybe this isn't surprising because Jordan Peele produced the film and co-wrote it. Nia DaCosta directed it. It's a beautiful looking film. The soundtrack's great. It's no Philip Glass Candyman soundtrack. Don't expect it to be that good, though it does reprise some of it at the end credits in a beautiful way. But it is good. It is interesting, above average for a contemporary horror soundtrack. It's very atmospheric. But anyway, the premise in the present day is that Anthony has grown up and he's an artist. And he's kind of an out there kind of artist. And I guess they depict him as kind of almost as Basquiat like figure. And his wife or girlfriend, played by Tiona Paris. I'm never going to say her name right. She played Monica Rambeau in WandaVision. So actually, her visage is on one of my thumbnails also. But she's a girlfriend, and she's like a kind of a big a rising wheel in the art world. And the art people in the art world are depicted as very shallow and bourgeois, neoliberal assholes, pretty much pretentious. This theme has been done many times because a lot of the people in the real art world are like that. So this is nothing new, but the layers added to it are that Anthony comes from humble beginnings, and he becomes interested in the mythology of Cabrini Green, where the Candyman, the first film, took place, and not knowing that he was an infant there. His mother's lied to him about his early years, but he becomes fascinated with that, and of course we get into the whole theme of gentrification, and hence the racist aspect of that, and so as Cabrini Green has become gentrified into a modern milieu, and the projects have been torn down, though a lot of the graffiti is still in some of the buildings and sub-basements. So too has this kind of working class kid, Anthony, been kind of co-opted and gentrified in the art world by his girlfriend. In other words, she's kind of, I think she loves him, but she's kind of grooming him, and he's not really, he kind of wants to follow his own path, and it's, he's a very irreverent guy. He sees through the bullshit of the art gallery owners and patrons. He tells off a couple of them. I will say one theme that was kind of, I guess, would be disturbing to some viewers, modern viewers. Disturbing, I don't mean like horror disturbing, but disturbing in a political incorrectness point of view. Ironically, because most people, white racists who love genre movies are already hating on this movie. They despise Jordan Peele, and they write all this stuff as woke bullshit, and that he's a racist against white people, and I've talked about that mentality before. I despise the dude bros, and they're kind of, yeah, I'm not. They're not the victims, okay? And fuck them. So, but curiously, I thought that there was a politically incorrect or maybe non-woke element or anti-woke element regarding homosexual characters. Uh, the homosexual and pansexual, because there's a gallery owner who is obviously homosexual or pansexual, but he does have sex with a woman, much to both of their regret, because it's the last thing that either of them ever do. Um, they're depicted as kind of stereotypical. They have friends who are gay, a gay couple who are friends, and basically the gay men generally are very like incredibly flamboyant. Tons of pithy, catty commentary, over the top kind of. Um, they do seem like cliches, but then I wondered, is that part of the statement? Is he saying that's not against all gay men, but is he saying that the gay men in that circle, this gentrified, yuppie, upper crust, liberal environment, regardless of their race, maybe they are just pretentious and phony because all the people there are pretentious and phony because we see all the other uh, patrons and prime movers in this art world around Anthony and his girlfriend. They're equally cliched, stereotype. There's a black woman who is trying to cultivate the girlfriend's career, and she spews cliche after cliche at her. You will go far because you're blah blah. The aesthetic of his, yeah. And she's saying nothing. It's just an endless word salad and ass kissing. And obviously, she doesn't really get Daniel. So who does get Daniel? Well, another kind of cliche trope is the suffering girlfriend who is trying to help, but he's slipping into something else, and that was okay. I mean, I think they use these cliches. I hope anyway they use these for a reason, to make some kind of statement. So at times this film could be considered heavy-handed. The parts that the dude bros think are heavy-handed, though, the emphasis on racial injustice and uh, whites ruthlessly murdering blacks for no reason over the centuries. To me, that part uh, really wasn't heavy-handed. To me, it was pretty keeping it real. I mean, it's the way it is. I mean, the way it has been. And I think the first film uh, put that element in there very strongly without beating you over the head with it. But it's like, here it is. The black man falls in love with a white woman. He pays the price kind of deal. So here we don't have an interracial scenario, a romance scenario, but we do have the idea of the unjustly accused black man. And so they transform Candyman into like a legacy character, which I had mixed feelings about. I liked the idea of Daniel Robitaille being the root of all these legends, but this is a valid take in that urban legends go through all these permutations the more they're told and retold. So the idea, I think, is that there's been many Candymans. In other words, many black men who are wrong, like Daniel Robitaille, and they say he's the first one. Like every few years, there's been another one and another set of circumstances, but the end result is the same. That a black man is unjustly persecuted and tortured and killed by these sadistic, racist white people. And here we go. The dude bros are like, man, he hates white people. It's like people who say who make fun of blaxploitation movies and say, man, every white character in that movie is an asshole. That's racist. And it's like, I'm a white guy. I'm a cracker. Okay, I'm from the South, the whole 9 yards. I love blaxploitation movies, and when I see the fact that all the white people are assholes in blaxploitation movies, I not only have no problem with it, but I laugh at those characters because I've known a lot of them in real life growing up in the South, and they are like that generally. They're not quite that broad and arch, especially nowadays. Though some in the Trump era, I guess, have been that way. But yeah, I mean, I don't care if the black guy annihilates all the white people in the blaxploitation movie. So this whole idea, this whole theme is not something that I would ever write off as a bunch of woke nonsense, quote unquote, which everyone writes off who's anti Jordan Peele, the racist dude bros, fan bros of today, hate a black woman starring in Star Trek and hate the gay couple in Star Trek, and they just hate everything. They think everything's based around their view of what they think they remember from their childhood about how things were. Fuck that whole mindset. I hate to be so vulgar and blunt, but yeah, I really have I think it's something that needs to be pushed back against. I'm tired of people telling me how horrible the new Star Trek series are and the Titans is because of all this bullshit and these black people, and I'm like, wow. Really? We're talking about properties that were written as progressive, with progressive values, probably decades before most of these idiots were born. And they're lamenting the good old days. Like they probably heard that from their bumpkin grandfather, speaking in a different context. And the good old days to them, those people, probably included killing black people for no reason, and being racist assholes. So that element is strong. And there's a twist to it, though. The guy who seems to be the truth teller, who's kind of kept all the information about the Candyman, and he reveals it to Anthony, and then later, in a different context, to his girlfriend. This character, he's a really cool older black guy who works at this laundromat. And the laundromat is like a contrast to the gentrified world that the characters are moving in most of the time. The laundromat's like, real life, for the 99%. And so when Anthony goes there, it's kind of like a refuge. I think it's him, like, going home, basically. And this character who kind of mentors him seems like the voice of reason and justice. Unfortunately, in a weird twist, he becomes kind of the villain because he's essentially grooming Anthony to become the new Candyman. He's grooming him psychologically. He's priming him, and then toward the end, he's actually Anthony is physically changing. Like he has a slight burn from the fire when he was a baby, but it begins to spread all over half of his body. He loses his eye toward the end. It goes white, and this guy completes it by cutting his hand off and putting a hook there in front of the captive wife. So Anthony's become kind of this vessel, for this guy's rage. This guy's kind of using the Candyman mythos or archetype to work out his own hatred about injustice. So I can't say he turns out to be a villain. He's a villain in the sense that he's harmful to Anthony in a way that was not warranted. But Anthony was marked, and they kind of make that part of the plot, is that when Candyman kidnapped Anthony as an infant, he marked him. He kind of marked him, I guess, as a potential Candyman, potential bearer of this legacy of someone that can be summoned if their name is called 5 times to right these wrongs by any means necessary. Pun intended, but yeah, it is. Very violent, as we know from the first movies. But this one is no different. It's extremely violent at times too. So it didn't, wimp out in that area. But then Anthony kind of fights it toward the end, and the cops come, and you can kind of guess that the end result for Anthony's not too great. So he almost ascends as Candyman. But, by this time, however, the girlfriend has shifted her views, and she kind of believes in all this. And so she calls Candyman, and essentially it is Anthony, who they've killed. The police have shot him to death, and naturally. And he comes back and, rends them limb from limb. And there's a bit of suspense there, so when this particularly odious white cop is going to get it. And he does, and because they arrest the girlfriend too, and they tell her this is how the story's going to go, and it's all this trumped up stuff. It's classic stuff. It's classic as in the continuing horrible dark legacy that is unfolding in this movie against African Americans, but it's all happened and is happening right now in reality on our world. So none of that part of it is fantasy at all. Just because there's a supernatural cat with a hook hand, that that's beside the point. The plight of our female lead at the very end, because she's by default become the female lead, being the last surviving real character. And now she's kind of woke in the sense that she sees, not only sees that all this is real with Candyman and the urban legends and the supernatural elements. Anthony wasn't just going mad and being some crazy artist, but that this is something that affects everyone in their culture and affects her now, because she's going to go to jail if she doesn't comply with this nasty cop, if she doesn't toe the line and go with the established narrative. And sorry, I have the line. But I mean, she feels like so she summons Candyman, and that takes care of that, and she gets free, and she encounters Candyman again, but this time it's Tony Todd and the Red Daniel Robitaille incarnation. And he looks incredible as always. He's still got the great voice, but unfortunately, he doesn't really say much. But he does admonish her to tell everyone in that great voice. And so, in other words, spread this legend further. Spread the fact Candyman's abroad in the land, and he's going to take care of business. And if only in real life, maybe there was a Candyman who would do this in these cases. Maybe we have these George Floyd like debacles going on daily in our society. So anyway, so that's enough of my review and my probably beating you over the head with my own leftist political views. But I do think all of it is implicit in the original material. It's explicit as hell in the current film, and I think that's deliberate. So I've told you the points where I agree with the ideology behind it and the messages, and the points where I think maybe some of it didn't hit the right note, like with the gay characters and things like that. But I think overall it is a condemnation of bourgeois modern liberal society, predominantly white, but also assimilated black and minority and gays, and the whole idea of not just Cabrini Green has been physically gentrified into something more livable for good people, but also the people themselves have been kind of papered over and whitewashed, I guess. And I think the realization is finally dawns on the character at the end, because she's been kind of part of the problem, whereas Anthony's been a victim of the problem. And by the way, there is a scene where he does see his mother, Vanessa Williams, and she does tell him about his real birthplace and what happened to him with Candyman. And so that's by that time he's starting to transform. So it's pretty rough. She does a great job. I just wanted to throw that in there because I mentioned her and I didn't make clear that scene was in there. And it's a key scene, of course, not only to his realizing his, I guess, destiny, but also us having a tangible, strong connection to the original film, and that is a continuation of this kind of saga. Basically, they've just recontextualized the saga. But like I said, it's not out of thin air. All of it's implicit in the original film. So I liked it. I liked it a lot. I don't feel it's on the same level of the original. I don't think it's one of the great modern horror films. I mean, I do think it's very well made. I do think it's thought provoking. So I can't say the whole thing I enjoyed all of it or was completely in accord with the way it handled the mythos of Candyman, but I do think it did have things to say, and they were said, and there are things that it's not really a bad thing to talk about. It's probably a very healthy thing to have these conversations now, and always has been, but especially now with so much this kind of powder keg of just hatred and dissatisfaction in all strata of society, which is predicated on this, unprecedented gulf inequality on all levels that we're suffering from. So anyway, that's my discourse on that. So thanks for listening. I made it under an hour. All right, I'll see you soon. And if I can hit the right button.